All right, so here's where we left off. And what I want to do now is start removing this decals and putting them into a render element, and also address the saturation on this red. If you're following along with this asset, what you can do first is let's grab the decals first. So what we're going to do is going to map this, and I actually have it here in my node editor. I'm going to drag this over. So this is the shader that's assigned to it. Now what we want is we want to grab the mask, which is down here, the main panel mask. This is where all the decals are for here. It's basically a black and white mask that's used to layer on another shader, which is up here, this main panel text shader, which is giving us our color. And it's obviously being masked with this black and white image. So we need to just push this out of our main shader, and the easiest way to do it is what I did is right now it's assigned to this hierarchy. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to assign it to the red steel, and by doing that we're just going to go click on the geo, just assign the red steel, and that should do this. And I'm just going to grab a section so we're not waiting for everything, and I'll just do this one since it's most obvious, and just do a quick render. So that should remove the decals, and now we're going to push that mask into a render element. Now if we jump into our render settings, now I have it here, go to render elements, and we're going to make an extra text. So we'll just hit add. And first thing I like to do is we'll rename it, and what we'll call this is, we'll call it Barista Decals Extra Text. And I usually like to just kind of copy paste this into the suffix and the explicit channel name just to keep consistency. And in the texture, what's going to be that's the texture it's requesting. So now by default, I had to actually maneuver this texture a bit so it could line up to the areas that I needed. So to save time and just do this as straightforward as I can, I actually just grab the one that's already assigned to the shader that has all the adjustments I did to this texture, so it aligns better. So I'm just going to grab this one directly. Let's go again. Let's select extra text, and now under the texture I'm just going to drag this mask onto texture. Boom. So now if you were to leave it like this, when we render and then we look at this V-Ray render element, this texture is going to assign to everything, which is not what we want. We just want this texture to be affecting this panel. So to do that is we're going to make a list. So if we go to exclude list and hit this little arrow, it's going to throw us to this relationship editor, and here's where you can assign it. But I find this to be, a little bit buggy, so I usually just close this out because by default it had already created this list. Once you click that little arrow, it creates this list. And now what I like to do is name it. So I'm just going to call this one V-Ray. You know what? Just to keep it, we'll just call this one Barista Decals Extra Text Set. And now we're just going to drag our geo into here. I'm going to hit F. And I'm going to just split this outliner into two so I can just look at the set. Just drag this onto here. And now it should just assign it to this. Well, not by default. So if you go back over here to extra text, it's technically an exclude list, which is the opposite of what we want. It's assigning to everything but that. But if you just click this one here, exclude list as inclusive set, it's the opposite. It's just now assigning it to this guy. So now let's test that out. Yeah, okay, that's good. And now if we just go into render elements, there it is, Barista Decals Extra Text, and there it is. So looks a little bit off, it's a little bit backwards because that's the way the shader is being built. It's actually doing quite the opposite. So what we could do here is go under And maybe we can do just a node here called reverse. We'll just dump this in here. Okay, and now we're gonna put this reverse in the extra text. So I'm just gonna drag this over here. And now let's just make sure that it is working. And there you go. So now we have the decals isolated as a different render element, and we can use that in comp. And the next thing I want to do is just show you how you guys can just control the the color on this. It seems a little bit too red, a little bit too bright, and there's an easy way to do this. So if we go back into our shader here, now I'm gonna map this shader again. So now this red steel is actually being used on all the other parts. So it's also being used in the panel and the bottom bit. So if you affect this, it should affect the whole body. We're gonna go into our diffuse, which is this guy, and I'm just gonna select both of these and map it out. And if you continue mapping this out, there's quite a bit of stuff happening behind the scenes. But what we really care about is over here. This is the multiplier. It's multiplying these operations by red over here. Now I could affect this, but I kind of don't like messing with the original shader. I like to always add my things separately so I can remove or go back to default. So I'm just gonna push in a remap HSV here. I'm gonna connect this, and this is going towards the diffuse, so I'm just gonna drop that right in there. And now I can have this node in between that I can just quickly adjust. And what I can do now is just do an IPR. And I'll just do something like this. So we have a range of different values. I'll keep my reference here on the side. Let me close this. Now what I want to do here is maybe drop the saturation down a teeny bit. So I'm just gonna, you see how sensitive it is? I just put 0.98 and I'm already seeing quite a difference. And I'm gonna drop the value by like 0.95, maybe a little bit more. Let's kind of go crazy. Okay, saturation can go back up a little bit. And you see this is how we kind of can just work our way and get something a little bit closer to what we got on the reference. And this will also help us with our value. So if I just grab a little bit more. Oh, interesting. So maybe there is a different red material. I thought I saw it all connected, but I thought I saw this red material was affecting the whole body. So we might have to go into each one of them and connect this HSV and make sure that the whole body is getting the same treatment. No big deal. Once we have one HSV looking good, then we can just drag it onto the other red shaders, and as you can see, just go in between here on the red steel material and just make sure you connect the diffuse in between here and here. So we can do that to the other parts. Let's see if we jump. And I'll just make a new. And you see, so there it is. There's the red material. Might have to do a little bit more digging in. Should be affecting everything. One way we can check is we'll throw in a diffuse render element so we can see what we're dealing with. Well, looks like it is working. It's just the way that the angle is positioned and maybe just the way the light is hitting it. Either way, I think we're going in the right direction. As you can see, that's how we kind of quickly block out some lighting. Got some general shapes going on, and we already are hitting a few issues. We're getting lights where we don't need, we're getting reflections where we don't need, and now it's time to tackle those. So we can finish off the top and then move on to the bottom and then all these other sections, because here it looks like none of these lights are giving us what we want. We might have to treat this separately. So let's actually do that really quick. That boils down to light linking. So for instance, this guy, since it's getting completely blown out, we might not want that to be affected by this light. So we'll select the light, we'll hit the geo, go under our render tab, and under light and shading, break light links. So if we render this section again, there you go. So now it's not being hit by that light, and I think at the moment it's being hit by the other two. So you can unlink all of them and just treat this on its own, or just keep it, or see if we can kind of work it in our top layer. Light linking is good for these kind of things, just to quickly remove, but it's always tricky because then you have to remember what's light linked, what's not. I mean, you could quickly find out if you just click a light and just go select objects illuminated by light, and as you can see, it selects everything but that. Once you start getting quite a bit of lights, and it gets kind of tricky because then you have to figure out. This is why I like to treat all these individual pieces on their own render elements, so we're not having to figure out what's light linked, what's not, and then we can just mask everything out in comp. And you'll see once we get there what I mean by that. All right, well, let's keep moving forward. Again, we're going to treat this separately, so this actually doesn't matter because it looks like there's no way you can really see that it's being connected. So we can just render this completely different and just literally just swap it in and you won't even see it. Same goes with this. We might have to treat this separately, and you know, it looks like it's behind this piece of geo. I mean, by the way it's looked at the camera, it's connected, but you know, we can just swap it in. Yeah, let's move forward now. We can probably work on this little hot highlight that we have in front. Let's see if we can get that. All right, let's move forward with that slight little line that's in the front. I'm gonna just make a new light, and I'm just realizing that we've not been naming our lights, which could be annoying later on. So let me just do that. This is gonna be, we got top, upper L. We got top left. Just call this one top right, and this one's gonna be top line. And let's get going. So for this one, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a very long light like this, make it slightly bigger. And actually, we're gonna need IPR for this. So I did a test earlier and we were able to get it really quick. I didn't want to have you guys sit through there while I try to figure it out. And just so you guys can see how I got it, was I just made a really long rectangle light here, and once this guy loads, you guys can see what's happening. All right, so now we get this result. What I do is I just rotated this slightly, and I just scooched it up forward, and just naturally the geometry bend this way. And let's look back at our reference. So we were able to get the same light. Obviously there's a little bit more different values, slightly tinted, and we have some areas that are fading in and out. So let's just look back here. So the way I did was I just kind of brought it back a little bit. Actually, I had to make it quite a bit much longer here, just to make sure that it reaches all the way to the end. And now if we want those like areas that are faded, we can actually go back to our trusty ramps. So let me just switch over here, use rectangle, just throw a ramp in there. Again, let's make sure we can see it. Never the right direction. Okay, so now the beauty of this is that now we can control what areas we want the area to fade down. So if I just here, as you can see how it's updating, and I want it more or less around here. And let me just squeeze this light, make sure that we got, okay, more. So what I'm focusing on is this corner here. So I don't want to lose any of this light on this side. Just want to make sure I keep it and then just have it slowly fade into. I'm losing this, so let's bring it back. All right, and I feel like we can probably switch this up a little bit more. So you know what, let's do the bump setting, and that should get us a little bit more tighter. There you go. So now you see how we have it pretty solid, and then it just fades and it goes over here. Now I'm just referring to the reference this whole time, and then over here on this side it should fade out a little bit, and that's this side over here. So and I'm gonna just bring back some value at the end, so it sort of fades out, and then we sort of have a little bit still, and then here it sort of fades out. I feel like we can kind of make this a little bit, let's switch it back to smooth. All right, and I think it might be a little bit too thin. We can see if we can make it slightly bigger. And so that is the little balancing act, because now we're getting a lot of spillage, and we don't want that. All right, let's see if we angle it just a tiny bit. See, also the other part about this is that once we start angling, we're going to start hitting too much of this face, and it's going to start messing with our fall ups we already have. Here we go. We got something going on. That's pretty good. Let's see what else. I'm also liking what's happening with this shadow. We might need a little bit more. Obviously, this is not working. We might have to do a separate light setup for this. Also, we'll need those lights for these, for this anisotropic reflections we want. Now again, like I said, normally I don't like light linking, but to reduce our comp so we're not having this monster comp trying to build all this other stuff, let's see if we can kind of attack these guys one by one. And first thing I'm gonna do is, again, since we have these sets here, so where is it? Button, select set members, and I'm gonna click that and click this light and hit, oh, I messed up. Select set members, shift select this light, and I'm gonna do the break light link. So now that should have broken down. Now we're still obviously getting some light. It's probably from all these other guys. So I'm gonna grab button, select set members, grab this light, break light links. There we go. So now what we can do is, let's work on one of them. If there's a little bit of perspective and it's not looking good, we might need to do this in orthographic, but again, I'm trying to see what areas I can try and keep in one render layer. So I'm just gonna just pause this for now, and let's get this light, and I'm gonna just snap it by holding V. I'm snapping to the point. And let me just look at wireframe because I want to make sure. Oh, guess it does not have a center point. All right, we're gonna have to guess this a little bit, and let's just scale it up. And according to the reference, let's go in and of course let's make our ramp. And now in here I'm gonna switch this to, which one was it? Let's see. Yeah, I think we might have to do radio. And this is going to be a little bit of a balancing act because we have to figure out what areas. Something like this. Let's move this up. I'm going to put another one here. Let's make sure it's only hitting. So right now I'm going to hit select objects illuminated. I'm going to keep that selection, just remove this guy by hitting, let's see, what did I hit? So I hit control and that should remove that selection and select this light. And what I'm going to do is basically break light links on everything. And now if I select this light again and hit select objects illuminated by light, it should just be this guy. So this might actually cause some issues too because it's actually going to spill onto here and I kind of want individually. Let's see what happens. If not, then we're going to have to break this geo apart. And let's see how it comes out. Alright, so that's how it came out. Obviously it's not what we want. Also make sure your light's always set to invisible because it was rendering out dark. Okay, also this thing by default comes in at 30, so let's drop this down. Alright, so now that the IPR is going, let's drop this even further. And this is not really doing what I wanted. Let's go back into the texture and let's see what we can do. Oh, wrong way. Alright, getting somewhere. Let me just look at the reference here. So let's see, we're going the wrong direction here. So might have to look into this shader if the bump is high enough. This might be an IPR issue too. Alright, let me dig into here. I think this is how we're gonna tackle this. We're gonna have to go into each one of these. Once we get one, then we'll just kind of duplicate this light and just throw it on all of them. Let's make sure it's aligned right in front of it. There we go. Okay, let's keep experimenting. Alright, so I poked around a little bit and to my discovery, it looks like the normal map that was assigned to this geo just wasn't strong enough and I couldn't really control it. So what I did is I just grabbed the map that is being used for the reflection and just push that into the bump. And I'll show you real quick if I just graph it. Alright, so I'm going to bring this node editor over so you guys can see. So this is the shader, the anisotropy steel material. And it was connected to this radio. Normal, but I disconnected it and just used the one that's being used for radio reflect. I just threw an HSV. I didn't really do anything to it. I just have it here just in case I want to make more contrast. But just pushing this into the bump, and I set it to 0.5 actually, if I can remove that. I was doing some tests, but yeah, looks like the default 0.05, and I just switched this over from normal map to bump map, and just so I can have also control. And that already was giving me something like this, which is what I wanted. I wanted to see some of these little rings here, and I want to make sure that my light is breaking up in this direction. And let me just bring over the reference. So it's getting there. It's in the right direction. You know, might need to bring down the values. Of course, you don't want anything blowing out like this. If you want to push values to blowing out levels, it's best to do it in comp, because that way we can dial it in and out. If we were to render this out like this, then we have no information to play with in post. So I'm going to just rebalance that, and while I'm at it too, I'm going to show you guys. So now that, let's say we like this, and we're going to have this on all the other buttons. What I did was just hit duplicate, just Control D, and I did it twice for these guys, but as you can see, the texture doesn't follow through, but at least the if I'm correct, yep, the settings are all following except the texture. So just to keep it consistent across all of them, let's just connect that texture we're using here on these other two, and I'm just gonna jump back on my node editor, and I'll make a new tab, and I'm gonna grab these three, graph them. Let's see, where are we? These two guys, and I'm just gonna one by one just drop them in. Go. All right, there you have it. So now you'll have one ramp that controls all of them. So if we were to just adjust this, you see. And we're gonna do the same for these other guys over here. And then we'll do a quick test. Actually, before we do a quick test, another thing you should know when you start duplicating things, and we're working with light linking, is every time you duplicate, you will break it. So if I select this one and go select objects, it's gonna grab everything, and that's not what we want. So let's just deselect this guy, select this light again, and just break those light links. And now that we have this connection, we can actually just do it on the other one. So I'm just gonna grab this, break light links, and grab that guy, break light links, deselect, select the next light, break light links. So now let's just grab one of these and just select objects illuminated by light, and it should just be that. Perfect. And now we need to just assign that texture onto these two, and I'm just gonna graph these three. It's these two. All right, now let's just drag that ramp like we did before, and there you have it. Awesome. Now let's do a quick render, and just grab. Oh, all right. I'm just gonna let this run real quick. So as these guys rendering, you can see we have the same lighting across all these guys except this guy. So let's investigate what's going on there real quick. Let me just make sure. Yep. This one seems to not be behaving. And another way to check if there's any other pieces getting hit by some light, it looks like there's. I'm just gonna grab this again and select lights illuminating it to double check. So looks like there are other lights hitting this geo. So let's do this. Let's grab that again. Select, break. Let's grab that, break. And let's make sure absolutely this guy's not hitting it. It is possible that it's getting too much contribution from these other lights, which is what I was trying to avoid, because then we'll have to split this geo into their own and then light link individually one by one. That might be the issue here. They might be too close together. This one, obviously, they're pretty far apart. But this one's right in the middle, and it's probably getting hit by both left and right. Also, this light doesn't seem to be behaving correctly because I'm seeing it being reflected onto the face here. So maybe there's something up with this. Duplicating sometimes causes some funky issues. So let's delete this. Look at that. There was another one right underneath it. Well, good thing I did that. Actually, let's undo. And let's grab both here. Yep, looks like there's two underneath. And just double check. Yep, this is the one I don't need. I'm gonna delete that. And that should fix it. There we go. Awesome. So now we set the button lights up. It's all good to go. Let's set up maybe this ring here. That'll be a nice one to tackle now. And let's move on to that. Alright, so this ring brought in some interesting challenges because it's angled and it's behind. Well, it's not really behind, but it's sort of creeping like here, and so it's a very interesting angle to catch some of these reflections we need from our reference. So we'll just bring this over to be able to catch this and catch this as well. And I needed a little bit more control. Like from the looks of it, looks like it might be a very like specific HDR it might have used, or to get sort of this breakage here, which is going to be very interesting to get. We might have to illustrate or fake this in comp. And I tried a few ways to get the light to behave the way I wanted it to, but I couldn't get enough controls, so which led me to a nice segue into introducing mesh lights in order to get this control over this reflection, because no matter what I did, if I put a light around here, it was sort of not reacting the way I wanted, and it was just taking way too long. And usually when something's taking way too long and I can't get anything near the ballpark, I have to try something else right away as to not waste time. So right now what I did is I unlinked all the lights on this piece. And I've also realized in the previous video I didn't actually have the decals and this little meter indicator here. So I just brought it in, make sure everything's all good. So let's dive into some mesh lights. So the first thing I do is usually I'm gonna analyze this shape. So what I need something to just kind of wrap around, and since this geo is already here, I'm just actually gonna grab a edge, and let's grab maybe this one here. I came to that decision because I just need something that I'm gonna just scale up, and this looks like it's a good starting point. So what I do from here is I just go under, is it modify? Yes. Under modify, convert polygon edge to curve. So that creates this curve out of that selection, and by default the transform pivot is at center world. So what I'm going to do is just go to modify center pivot, and now it's here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scale up and pull it out. And I'm going to need another one so I can basically create a surface from it. So I'm going to duplicate it, go down and actually scale it down to basically sort of mimic that shape we're going to need for this light. And now I select both of these guys, and then I go under surfaces, loft. So that creates this, And look, by default, it looks like the faces are pointing in the right direction. And right before I go too deep into this, let's start organizing a little bit. So I'm just going to throw all this into a group. This is going to be, what's the name of this geo? Main window, sure. So let's close that, and I'm just going to call this mesh light main window group. There's going to be our curves, and here's our loft. Now, mesh lights don't work on these surfaces, so we need to turn it into polygons. So let's select that loft and hit modify, convert NURBS to polygon. Boom. So there it goes. And now we can just hide this guy. Let's take a look. And yeah, by default, looks like our faces are facing the direction we need. If it's this way for you guys, if it's where is it? If it lofts in this direction, it's not going to work because the light is going to be kind of pointing inward, and we need it to point in through here. So I'm just going to undo that. You can just reverse, and that should flip the faces. Okay, so again, just drop it in here. I just want to get organized a little bit. Mesh light main window geo. Cool. Now that that's good, now we're going to go under, while selecting this, modify, create V-Ray mesh lights, turn selection into lights, works for meshes only. Cool. So now what that does, it creates two things. It creates this light linking, and that's what you use to light link things. Right now it's obviously like all the other lights, is just hitting everything by default. And here's your light properties. So if I switch over to, so that's what that light is. And again, it's coming in at default 30. Okay, so organize a little bit. Let's throw this in here, and let's select this, and like we do with the other lights, is select objects illuminated by light. Let's just deselect the geo we want, which is this guy underneath. Select the light link, break light links. And now if we were to grab this again and select objects, it should only be hitting that. So the beauty about this is that we have these curves that are actually still live. If you can see by the way it's highlighted, we can actually just kind of scale this in and still modify it while keeping it live, because it's still keeping that history. This polygon shape is keeping the history with the loft, and the loft still has the history with the polycurves here. Okay, so let's get something like this going, and let's do a quick test. Oh, and make sure that your mesh here is set to primary visibility off. Otherwise, you're just going to get that rendered, and we don't need it. We don't need to see it. Alrighty. So we're getting a lot of that reflection jumping out from here onto the body, just not what we want. All right, so let's actually adjust this light. Let's just set it down to 2.5. Okay. And I'm just going to IPR it so we can get some quick feedback. There we go. All right, so let's just drop this down to 1. All right, so there's this big shape, and obviously it's just reflecting right onto this thing. So that makes sense why it's all working like this, but we need this shape. So handy dandy ramps. Now, this is also a good segue to mesh lights when it comes to ramps. They follow the UVs that are in the geo. So sometimes you might not have the geo and the UVs that you want. So you're going to have to modify the UVs. Now, if we take a look, and I'm just going to pause this because we're going to need to UV, and I don't want this thing running. All right, so let's go under Model UV Editor, and let's take a look at the UVs here. Just connect this toolkit. Cool. So these are RUVs. They might be okay, but I usually tend to kind of do my own. Actually, these might be all right. And one way to test it is if we just go and create a new, where am I? And here's the thing: if we were to go into this mesh light and hit a ramp, watch what happens. And we hit 6. Yeah, so we don't actually see that ramp on here. If we go back into the mesh light, there's no see texture thing. So that's the only downfall about these mesh lights, is that you're not going to be able to by default visually see what's happening. So the workaround that is actually assigning either a surface shader or a V-Ray material and just assign it. And wherever this ramp is, I'm just gonna shift select. So there's that ramp. And I'm just gonna assign that ramp into the out color so we can visually see. Now this doesn't have any effect because it's actually being driven by the mesh light and that disconnection. So this is just for us. This is just purely to see what's going on. So you can see it's actually going the wrong way. We're gonna need something like this. Oh, actually this is not too bad. There are some cases where the UVs are not what you want and you're gonna need to straighten them out, but we lucked out on this one. Okay, so let's bring back our reference. So what we're gonna need is something around this. So let's take a look at our ramp. All right, and let's just quickly block out something for the bottom. So I found this to be just have a little bit more power. It's not going to give us a one-to-one result, but it was the other ways were just you know, they were very too specific. I'm wondering if it must have been a very unique HDR to get it those exact reflections, but we can do our own. Okay, let's smooth it out. All right, let's just see what that does. All right. So a few things are happening here. Those reflections are getting really annoying, which is gonna make me want to just remove them all together or just work on this on its own. I think that might be the way for this guy, and we're gonna have masks to kind of replace what comes out of the original. Just kind of dump it on top because I don't like that these reflections are coming in here. I don't like what's happening with these guys, and we're just trying to get this rim to work correctly. So this is not a big deal. We can work on this on the side. So here I had a test scene here, but where I was testing an HDR. Well, not really an HDR, just a dome, and that didn't really come out too well. So we can just delete that, and I'm gonna just start splitting this up. Barista. Body, well, it's not really the body anymore. Main window, beauty. And let's bring in our mesh light. Make sure I grab everything I need. Okay. And let's take a look. So we removed the red at least, and now there's other issues we're getting here. I'm just going to do a test and just remove, I'm just going to remove everything but that. Oh, well, that answers that question. Looks like we're gonna have to deal with this on our own. So let's, you know what? Let's throw in some render elements so we can see what's going on. So they're all turned off here for some reason. So I do this so we can kind of take a look at what paths this is coming from, and it looks like it's gonna be reflections. That's the reflection, but good thing is this is all in the spec, so that's not a problem. When we start going into comp, we can actually just edit this reflection and probably just remove this altogether. Or let's see if we can do this test real quick. What if we just remove nope, looks like it's gonna happen no matter what. All right, well, it was worth the test. Looks like we'll have to deal with that in comp. No worries. Let's then focus on just the specular of this. All right, well, you know, we can kind of keep playing with this, and this is what I mean. Like, there are these very specific dips that are interesting, and when it comes to chrome reflections, it's been known that we would get a lot interesting reflections, and you know, in comp things get edited, and we can kind of make sure it's nice and solid towards the end, and then in comp we'll use this specular and just kind of cut it around and just shape it out how we want. So the point is just getting as much information as we can all in one hit, and then we can adjust later on. I'm okay with moving forward with this being on its own, and we're just going to use a mask to kind of just plop it in afterwards. I'll probably throw in another light so we can get something interesting inside. Let me just quickly do that. Now the beauty of it is when you are working now separately from the body is that you don't even need to worry about light linking, because right now we don't really care. We want the whole thing to get hit. This is just a area specifically just for this piece. Let's just look at the front view here. And now what I want here is just a nice fall off from center out. Now let's just reverse this. Because I want some information in here as well. Oh, sorry, the light is not set to invisible. There we go. Now the reason I like this a little bit better than our reference is because we feel a little bit more depth in here. This might be also due to the compression, but our reference doesn't really, it has a little bit of this shadow, but I kind of like this better, where you kind of can see a little, you can feel it's like behind everything. All right, and we're missing those guys inside, so let's bring those over. Let's pause this. Okay. So there you have it. We have the mesh lights working. We have this inside. And that's good to go. We're going to work on this as a separate render layer. And we're going to just remove this and when it comes to comp. So for now, we're just trying to provide as much information as we can. And we have the top ready to go. There are some areas that need adjustments. Oh, actually, one last thing. is, although we got these nice anisotropic reflections working now, what I found also in our reference, we have some interesting inconsistencies when it comes to these rings around them. I found it very interesting. I kind of feel like it would be a waste of time if we were to just make each one their own light. This looks fairly even all throughout, and I kind of want to adjust this in comp. So what I could do is just make a dome light, kind of make sure it only hits this piece of geo, and then in comp we can just dim these down instead of having different lights for everything. Here it's a little bit much easier to just start thinking in the future and what's going to make things much simpler. So to do that, we're just going to unlink all of these guys. Select lights, select that geo, and just break them all together. And I'll make a new dome. And this one's going to be called, let's make sure we've got the name of this. Button ring, sure. Button ring dome. Select objects that are hitting it, and let's just make sure we remove this guy. And break light links. So now we have this dome affecting just those rings, and of course by default, oh, it's not too bad, it's 1, which is okay, and I just want to see the value here. Alright, interesting stuff. I think we have this guy still affecting everything. Whoa. Interesting. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, that was weird, but I got it working now, and I unlinked everything. Just had to do it a few times apparently. And select this guy, and again make light links. Okay, one more time, select objects. All right, cool. There we go. Okay, I'm just gonna pause it real quick and just bring out this. Interesting. So this is acting a little bit interesting. So select objects. I just want to make sure. Yep. Well, I was expecting that to be a little bit more even. This might be getting hit by other lights as well, or there might be something right above it that's not letting me. Well, guess a little bit more investigating. Looks like we're having some other issues. All right, let me take a look at that, but that's the plan, is to make sure we have this all even so we can adjust them in comp. Just get something consistent like this, and then we'll adjust it later on. I'm not too worried about the rest, but we already started blocking out the top, and we're just going to keep finessing these areas. We already blocked out the lights. This area we might have to break off on its own because it was getting all blown out when we were doing it. And the decals are all separated, and I think we're pretty much in a good shape to move on. Or we can tackle this grinder in this layer again by doing some light linking. So then we just have the top all in one, and then we can move on to the center pieces. and then move on to finally the bottom, and then let's get this render out. So I think that's good for now. We've already started blocking majority of this. I'm going to get this all consistent and just kind of fine tune here and there for the top, and then we'll move on.